Good evening.
Good evening. Good evening. What's up, Marie?
How you doing? How's everyone doing? We're going to have a wonderful show tonight, Julius and Mr. Hall. Good evening to you, Lee. Good evening to you, Louise.
Good evening.
Good evening. Good evening.
Go ahead, Miko.
Well, before we get started, good evening, good evening, good evening. I am excited, as always, here with you. Another edition of Ink to Ink, Incarceration to Incorporation. Why are we here? Because we want to change the narrative. So often we have been hearing about recidivism and how men and women, when they come home, automatically are going back into the system. Well, that is not true. Changing the narrative. There are so many men and women who are successful, whether it's relationship, whether it's organization, whether it's employment, whatever it is, they are successful. And we are here providing a platform. And we are grateful for Julius Hall with the brainchild of this ATR, All Things Relevant Media, to give us returning citizens an opportunity to change the narrative. We're also thankful for our boy AB, who has thought about incarceration to incorporation. But tonight, we are talking about reentry and recidivism. Reentry and recidivism. And we have two guests that are pros, if you will, at both of these categories. So we're going to allow them to come on and tell us who they are, and then we're going to talk about some of the things that they got going. But there is something, before I turn it over, that we have in common, a common denominator, and that is incarceration. For we may have started out wrong, but we have all finished strong. So without further ado, Louise, tell us who you are and what is your relationship to incarceration.
Hey, thanks, Julius, and great to meet you, Marie. So I'm Louise Wozleski. I live here in Atlanta, just a few miles up the road from you guys. And when I was a teenager, my father got a criminal conviction. So we were lucky that he got a suspended sentence and probation. So we didn't really lose him, just while he was arrested and processed. But as a result of that plea and conviction, he lost his job. He couldn't get hired again. And so for 30 years, I wondered, what could I do to create second chances for people like my dad? And ended up doing what I'm doing now, which is a software company to connect all the different pieces that a returning citizen has to deal with to help them find a job with somebody like Lee Safe Staffing, find somewhere to live, get the coaching or navigation support they need, get their treatment needs met, and just be successful and get out of the system.
Great. Lee?
Well, just like Louise, I appreciate her partnership, and she's one of my favorite partners out there, reentry partners. I was a formerly incarcerated individual, returned citizen, not just returning citizen, in that, like I always say, I have a tax return. That means I'm paying taxes. So I've returned back to some things I don't like to return to. But anyway, we have to do it. I have returned. My reentry started at entry. I started right where I was inside prison for change. In prison, I was even pastoring a church there and came out pastoring. And then we came out here, hit the ground running, volunteering for reentry coalitions like GGRA, Greater Granite Reentry Alliance. Was the president of that, the second president of GGRA. Also started a church, and I pastor a church, as well as I am the CEO of Life Empowerment Enterprises, which is a reentry wraparound service company. We pretty much quarterback several different companies, nonprofits such as Vital Signs, which is a reentry housing, have 15 beds for men coming out of prison. We also certify life coaches, connect them to the men when they're in the house. We also have a transportation system called Uplift, Uber plus Lyft, have a partnership with Uber Lyft to give free rides for men and women to get to work, to their probation office, to special classes. We're working with Safe Staffing. Basically, it's a staffing agency for returning citizens to get jobs. And we have some things we really like doing out there is something called Tackle the Shackles. Tackle the Shackles is a national reentry coalition partnering with former NFL, current and former NFL players using their star power and their influence, along with military veterans, to change the narrative as well, Brother Julius, in terms of how we think about returning citizens. And also they are a fundraising team. Tackle the Shackles. And the last but not least thing is that we got a documentary out called First Week Out. First Week Out, you can look it up at www.firstweekout.com. It is depicting a person that came out of prison, done 42 years in prison, and they're looking at his first week out. I'm excited about being here. Thank you for having me, Julius and Marie and Julius.
Well, Miss Louise, may I ask a question? I like when you said that you wanted to learn more about incarceration, even though that your father was not incarcerated for a long time. I think that's very noble of you to want to learn about it. So could you tell me more, go into depths about your program?
Yeah, so I'm an engineer by education. I actually was a genuine rocket engineer, like a rocket scientist thing, yes. Genuinely. And so I like to understand how all the different pieces fit together. But when I wanted to do something about this issue, I didn't know anything about how the justice system works in the US, because I grew up in the UK, as you can possibly tell from my accent. And so I started interviewing returning citizens. And I talked to service providers, and groups like OAA. And I talked to judges. It was really weird to find myself at lunch one day with 7 judges and not actually be in trouble. Wow. I talked to legislators. I know cabinet secretaries for public safety now, all sorts of people, anybody involved, because I just wanted to understand how things worked. And what I heard was, it doesn't work. It doesn't work for anyone. And everybody said they were overwhelmed, whether you were a professional or a returning citizen. And everybody was using different words. But what I understood was this core problem was it was hard to find resources. It was hard to connect with resources. And then when you have resources, like they all kind of talk past each other because they, like your workforce person doesn't know what your housing person's doing and your PO doesn't know really what's going on with your treatment. And it's just overwhelming. it's overwhelming for the case manager trying to keep up with all that stuff too. So that was a problem that I realized I could solve with technology, which is what I'm good at. So there are lots of problems you can't solve. If the problem was a shortage of beds, you can't fix a shortage of beds with technology. But what I found was there were empty beds all over the country, but the right people couldn't find the right beds. So those are the sorts of things that we're working on. But I think the really transformative and different thing is we give the person their own information. We give them dignity. We make it possible for them to make choices. And so I just, love working with Lee because his life coaches, his reentry coaches can use our pocket software to connect with the people they're coaching, and they can work together to build a plan. And the person has a voice, and the person has control of their information, and they can choose who they share it with. They can contribute. They can message. They have an equal seat at the table, if not a superior seat, compared to how, casework is often something that's done to someone as opposed to done with and by themselves.
So, Miss Louise and Mr. Lee, I want both of you to answer this question for me because I hear this word a lot, policy.
1 second.
So how do you both feel about policy? Lee, could you answer that question for me?
Yes, thank you. Well, policy is very, very important as it relates to reducing prison recidivism. I always talk about when I was working for the Department of Community Supervision, Probation and Parole as a community coordinator, I knew that it was just a revolving door because we went from mass incarceration to mass supervision. And I've seen a lot of people still violated because of policy.
Right.
Policy that has not changed. But I also seen over the years, last 10 or so years that I've been doing reentry, some policies change, which directly help to reduce some prison recidivism. One recently, a law that just changed, trying to get people off of supervision early, because in Georgia, we have up to 10 years or so people can be on probation. And that is just prolonging really the opportunity to violate people. By that being changed, policy changes like that, like ban the box and things of that nature, changing that policy made it easier for me to even get hired for the state of Georgia because that was not on the application. And I was able to get looked at and interviewed because, ban the box. So policy directly affects recidivism in a very positive way. Change policy. Policies, if it's negative policy, it's going to affect it. If it's positive policy, it will affect it as well.
Louise, can you tell me your input on it?
Yeah. Policy is a really interesting problem because it can be different from state to state. It can be different from county to state and federal. And so often the first challenge is working out even what policies you're dealing with and who has the ability to change them. And so what we do with departments is we try and work out what can they do to get started without any changes in policy. Right. And so usually you just have to sit down and think and discuss and go, well, what problem are you trying to solve? And what can we do that's not going to violate policy and get started with that? So if you look at recidivism and revocations, right, violations, a lot of that is driven by failures to appear. That's like the number one thing. But part of the problem with failures to appear is people move around and then their court date gets sent to the address they were couch surfing at like 3 months ago. And they don't get a reminder and they don't, they don't know. And so we make it possible for a person to report a change of address, and we make it possible to send them text reminders. And it's amazing when people get reminders, just like going to the dentist, they show up. And that doesn't need a policy change, right? At all. But there are things that do need policy changes. And so one of the really interesting things that Louisiana did and Mississippi is doing now, they had to have a policy change to allow people to do probation and parole visits remotely, like over FaceTime or Zoom or like our app or something. And so Louisiana did it specifically so that people could go work on the oil rigs in the Gulf. Because if you're working on a rig, you're like 3 weeks on, 3 weeks off, 3 weeks on, 3 weeks off. If you have to go visit your PO in the middle of a 3-week shift, that isn't happening. And so those reporting obligations were getting in the way of people getting good, paying, stable jobs that, by the way, if you're offshore, you're kind of out of trouble as well.
Right.
And so now we're supporting legislation going through in Mississippi to allow that. And I think these kinds of changes are really important because with the pandemic, we've shown that video reporting is just as good as in person. And in fact, it's easier because you don't have to spend money on transportation. You don't lose as much time off the job. You don't have to pay for childcare. And it's just as good. But once that public health emergency is over, if you don't change the policies, we risk going back to everybody having to go sit in the big old room in the broken chairs and wait for somebody to come out and call you.
Right.
Well, I have a question, and Marie, if I'm not clear, by all means, you can take over. But for Louise and for Pastor Lee, how do we get an audience? And I know when we talk about reentry and recidivism, we need an audience in order to present policy, in order to change policy. How do we get an audience? Lee, primarily, when I say an audience with you, how do we let probations and parole or Department of Community Supervision know that the narrative must change? And then for you, Louise, the audience that I'm speaking of, how do you allow legislators to know that, listen, there are a lot of Lees and Juliuses that are still inside incarceration, needing an opportunity to come out? How do we gain an audience so that we can change the narrative? Lee, you go first.
One of the things that we done at the Department of Community Supervision is that we had resource providers come in to speak with the officers. And once a month when we had our staff meeting, you just get with the chief there, your local probation and parole, and say, I have a resource. I have some information that I can share with your officers. And usually they allow you to do that short presentation to the officers or leadership. And that's one way that we've kind of created an audience. As long as you got a resource, you got something that's going to help the returning citizen. Number two, holding summits, reentry summits and things of that nature. You can invite the audience to you. A coalition meeting, holding a reentry coalition meeting, invite the resource or the audience to you. They will have some interest in that. And so always have speakers that can educate, speakers that can inform and help to change the narrative. Maybe even have some returning citizens share about their testimonies, because we always hear about the negative things. They don't see a Julius Campbell out there. They need to know about a Julius Campbell because, there are some very effective leaders out there. They also need us in the boardroom as lived experience individuals can help them, save some money by some of these broken programs that are not really effective if you're not getting the input from the ones who's receiving the program. We need returning citizens in the boardroom to talk about what works and what doesn't work. So that's kind of what I'm sure Louise can put some other stuff on the table. I've probably left a lot on the table there. So go ahead, Louise.
Well, we all come at things from different points of view. And one of the things that I love about like our Monday morning reentry prayer meeting is we all come from different points of view and we bring different things and we learn from each other and support each other. one of the easiest things for people to do if they're in Georgia is on February the 22nd, it is Justice Day at the Capitol. And you can go to the Capitol building and there will be, I don't know what the numbers are going to be because of COVID, but usually there's somewhere between like 600 and 800 of us who show up en masse, and we kind of storm the Georgia Capitol, but in a good way, right? So we meet beforehand.
Okay,
right? We meet beforehand, and we'll get like a briefing paper from Georgia Justice Project, Southern Center for Human Rights. There's a whole bunch of different reentry activist groups, and they tell us what legislation is going through, and you can look up who your state rep is and your state senator, and you can go talk to them. And they tell you how to fill out the form to get your guy or woman to come out of the chamber and actually talk to you. And so I've done that several years, and you won't believe it works until I tell you what happened in my particular case. So Georgia has this reentry housing vouchers, but they were, if you were a sex offender, you were not allowed to get a reentry housing voucher. They were excluded. And so GJP and the posse were trying to get that changed. And so I hung around until the very end because I'm that kind of a stick it out person. And I cornered one of the legislators as he was coming out after everybody else had gone to get their lunch. And I said, hi, legislator so-and-so, I'm here with the Justice Day at the Capitol, and I'd like to talk to you about bill so-and-so. And, this bill would allow sex offenders who are being released also to have the same housing opportunity that other offenders get. And his response to me was, my first obligation is to make sure my 3 little girls are safe. And I said to him, well, if you don't fund housing for somebody like that, they could be sleeping in the piney woods at the bottom of your yard and you wouldn't know. But if you fund the housing for them until they're stable and they've got a job, you know exactly where they're sleeping every night. And it's not in the piney woods at the bottom of your yard. And he looked at me and he said, I have never thought about it that way before. So I went back to the organizers and told them who I had spoken to and what have you. And that legislator signed on to support the bill that he originally was going to reject. And I didn't go as Louise Wozolewski, CEO of Civilate, the provider of the Pocket Reentry software. I went as a voter in Fulton County, and you represent my district, or you're on the Criminal Justice Committee that's handling these bills. So I think you can get an audience simply by going to the Capitol and filling out a form to get your legislator to come out and talk to you. And if you know what bills there are and you've got good arguments, they're going to listen. And when you do it at something like Justice Day on coming up next week, the 22nd, you're doing it with this massive other group of people, and you're not a lone voice. And they hear and they listen.
So,
Hello, Marie, because I don't know whether my camera working or not. You see me in the corner up there?
I see you.
Oh, just because you're looking good today and you getting to be, Julie's gonna taught you to be so good at this here, you just forget all about that I was even on the show now. But anyway.
Don't start with me.
I mess with her all the time. We all of what we're doing individually is good. But this program, and I'm sure that you all would champion what I'm about to say, if we're going to truly help returning citizens and to educate while those guys are still inside, we need to connect the dots. And that's one of the things that Julius Campbell, we call Miko, because I'm the original Julius, since I'm the oldest. That's one thing that he is always advocating for. We need to connect the dots. we're doing things, but if we do these things together, then we can help more people and we can be more effective. So that is one of the things that we need to try to get the legislators to look at also, how we can connect these dots to make life better for these people so we can cut down on recidivism. You know,
Did you not
it's
hear what
growing.
Miss Louise said, Mr. Hall? Me, you, Julius Campbell, and Miss Louise and Lee, all us can meet to the Capitol building February the 22nd.
Well, I think I'll send you as
And
my proxy.
that's connecting the dots.
Okay, yeah, and I think that you'll be there for as a proxy for me and Julius, because you know how busy we are. I thought we were busy, but Lee is really busy. Lee got so much going on. I don't know how you do it in a day. I thought I was busy.
I don't do it by myself. It takes a team. I so happen to pastor a church that's probably 90% reentry, returning citizens who have a passion, like everybody on here, just have a passion to want to help other returning citizens. So we kind of put them in place. But Julius Hall, you're right on. Let me brag a little bit about Louise software. When I saw and heard about her software, this is one of the reasons why I partner with her to answer your question here. How do we all come on the same page? Well, that software, starting from the inside, can help returning citizens through a life coach on the inside, because reentry starts at entry, right? And so they can, especially at a prison camp, a place like that, maybe even in an actual prison, if it's been approved, can use that software with a life coach, connect them to resources. As they come out, they can do a reentry plan. When they come out, they have now this life coach to help them connect to the software, and the software got all of these wraparound services that they have the ability to search. They have the ability to look for. Hey, if I need housing, I ain't waiting on Pastor Lee to get me no housing. Listen, Pastor Lee got his house. Pastor Lee at home. I need housing, so I want to be proactive in searching it for myself. Anger management class. I'm going to do this myself. So that software, the Pocket software, is spelled POKKET.com. You can go there, and that software will help you connect everybody, connect the dots in the community.
Well, how do we get those? How do we get Pocket in front of the warden, so the warden can present it to the BOP regional director, so the regional director can you know how the system go in the feds, so they can get permission from the Bureau of Prisons to because this is such a needed piece of software. We have access in the federal system, especially you have computers all day long. You have your own email system. So we need to be able to get somebody to look at this, because these resources, because if you're able to go on and search for what, like housing. I know guys that left prison and went to Goodwill to live because they had nowhere to go. And what we need to be able to do is connect these people and with the resources that can get them to look at Pocket, so that they can say, okay, well, I'm going to Midway, Georgia. What's the nearest place where I can look and see where I can go here, Savannah, and they got something there. I can talk to this brother, Julius Campbell, who might can get me a job here doing some labor here. These are the resources. This keeps a person from being a repeat offender. This cuts down on the recidivism rate. And somebody has to listen, and we have to be in a position to make them listen, because we're trying to help. And
Louise, let Louise tell some of her challenges. Answer that question for Julius Hall, Louise. What have been some of your challenges in getting this information out, but also what have been some of your successes?
Yeah, so the challenges are always that whenever you're trying to do something new like this, nobody has money in the budget, first of all, right? That's an obvious one. And then, another challenge has been that it really takes a mind shift, particularly somewhere like BOP, to say, well, the returning citizen should have agency, that they should have their own information, that they should be able to make some of their own decisions. And I think, Lee said earlier that he's really seen a change in attitude in some areas, and we're seeing that change. So I go to meetings that all the cabinet secretaries and commissioners, state secretaries and commissioners from around the country go to. And it's, it's reasonably like exclusive, right? And they talk. And you get to listen. You don't get to talk, but you get to listen. And you can hear what's important to them and what they care about and what they're wrestling with. And I can tell you that even just over the last 3 years, I've heard a change in attitude. And now I'm understanding things like they're trying to make a change, but there's culture issues, or they're trying to make a change, but there's this other legislative priority, or they're trying to make a change, but they've got, prisons without air conditioning and they're not delivering any programming, and there's, staff shortages that are causing safety risk to everyone. So there's really, I see an improved attitude around trying to get people help in different ways. And then they've just been terribly afraid of technology. And, it's amazing, but until the pandemic, lots of probation and parole officers didn't even have smartphones, right? They only had a desk phone. So those are some of the challenges. But we're always happy to talk. We're always happy to explain. We're always happy to, let them try things out. And work out what's possible. But I want to talk about some of the successes, because the successes are way more fun than dwelling on the challenges. Yes. And one of the things is our software, it will let you do a check-in to say, I went to treatment, I was really here and it was me and not my girlfriend. But it doesn't follow you all the time. And so there are some places that are like, well, I want to know where that guy is all the time. That's not us. But we do make it easier for somebody to show their PO they're doing what they need to do. We send reminders to people for their appointments and stuff like this. So in Louisiana, we've got some work going there, and they're just a great team of people. And one of the young people who was in their diversion program, right? So they got their, got themselves in some trouble, but they had this opportunity to kind of work with a young adult focused PO. When they finished that program and finished their supervision, they said, can I keep Pocket? Because it had the resources, right? Because it had the information coming out from the office saying, there's a hiring fair, there's a clinic, and a lot of that credit goes to the officer that was working with that young person, right? Because they really were supportive. But when somebody says, I want to keep this because it helped me get a job, it helped me get stable, it helped me get out of that situation, that's a success. Lee's mentioned GGRA, the Greater Granite Reentry Alliance, and there was a woman we interviewed there who'd been in the program, and she said, this is the first time in 30 years I've been in and out of every prison and jail in the Southeast. That was probably a bit of an exaggeration, but she'd been in and out for 30 years. Like, this is the first time I got my 30 days dry chit. I've got I'm renting my own room, and I just got promoted to line supervisor at the factory where she worked. Awesome. Those are the stories, right? That's what makes it worthwhile. When you hear people who are successful, like Lee's successful, like Julius is successful, and many others.
Awesome. So, Lee,
you
share also. Okay, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Marie.
No, go ahead, Miko.
Go ahead, Marie. All right, Lee, share some of your successes and challenges.
Well, you heard me mention all the different things that we got ourselves into because of the passion that was ignited when I was in prison. Um, Julius Hall, we spent some time there. If people didn't know that, they know that now, Julius. Now, so we spent some time here. And
created this show so they can know it.
And he can witness. He can witness. Reentry started entry. Not only that resources need to come to us, we need to become a resource. And I decided that I was going to be resourceful and not just wait for resources to come to me. I had some talent. I had some ability, some entrepreneurship background. I had, I wanted to share that. I wanted to help. Everybody knows something, right? And so my success story started on the inside. And the PATH program, which federal government was using, took it and used it for, to help people because it was very successful. Coming out, never thought I was going to be able to get a job working for the state of Georgia, working for really a position that Governor Deal developed through the Georgia PRI Prison Reentry Initiative, which, by the way, became the blueprint for the First Step Act that the president signed for us. And so that position allowed me to connect with beautiful people like Louise all over the state. I was able to now utilize my talent, my skills, and my ability out here, and just through that passion. It just starts with a passion and a desire to want to help and use your talent. So there's a staffing agency that was produced. There was housing, transportation, all that. I can give you a quick story about how transportation started. I was actually working for probation and parole, had my own office there, and I was doing a little ear hustling as the probation officer was, allegedly doing his job, trying to get a probationer in to meet with him. And he said, this was in Granite, where there's not a public transportation system. He said, I'm going to lock you up if you don't come here and get to see me right now. And these are the beginnings of violations that can take place. And I heard that. I was ear hustling. And I said, Lord, what can we do to help? And the way the Lord works with me, he gives me acronyms. And so the acronym he gave me was uplift. I'm like, okay, God, I need this is a puzzle I can't fix. Uplift. Okay, uplift. Everybody needs an uplift. And so the acronym started with, okay, uplift, Uber plus Lyft. That was already a infrastructure already there. All I needed to do is make a connection to the people I need to make a connection with to start an Uber Lyft for people who are coming, who out there need a ride to the probation office. So I did that. And I said, who gonna pay for this? If somebody got to pay for this, they're not going to let it be free. And so I went to United Way just to think through the process. United Way won an award there, from an innovation of uplift and runner-up award, and it gave us $10,000, and later on gave us $15,000, and then after that, 10 more thousand every year to give free rides for returning citizens to get to their probation office, to get to work, to get to special classes. So it's things like that has came out of just passion and inspiration and desire to do what you're doing, Julius, not to see people go back to prison, because we've been there. And we know, Brother Hall, what it feels like to be inside prison, and we don't want people to go there. So use your passion that way and your pain to become purpose. And that's all I've done. Yeah, that's all I've done. It was nothing.
I love that. Go ahead, Pastor Lee.
Yeah. You just tap into your pain, and we can transform it and let it be a motivator, not See, I could have got bitter because I was there. I was an innocent person. And I know a lot of people say that, but I was innocent. But I was not sinless. All right. So I got my own faults and my own shortcomings,
Right.
But here's the thing. it was painful to be away from my family, but I said, I'm not going to be bitter. I'm going to be better. And so I use my skills and my abilities to help other people. And it's served us well since then. So, yeah.
I think, Pastor Lee, that it was purpose for you to be there. It was
I
purpose
have
for
to
you to
agree
be
with you.
there so that you can do what you're doing right now. Yes, you was innocent. You say you wasn't sinless, and none of us are. But it was purpose for you to be there so that you can do what you're doing now to help returning citizens to get rise to, because passion and purpose, when they collide together, it's explosive.
Mm, mm.
I like
Powerful.
Yeah.
that. I
Well,
like
I don't know.
that.
We about to have church right up in here right
Oh,
now,
don't stop.
Man.
Listen. Paul Thompson is watching, and Paul Thompson said, "Passion is a vital part of success." He says,
Yeah.
"Awesome." And we also have Bernard Brown. He says, "Good afternoon." And Mr. Ellis says, "This is a great show. I'm so proud of what you all are doing." And Tisha Folson, all the way out of Las Vegas, is also joining us along with another friend of mine. So I want you, as we turn the corner here, Louise, you start, and then Lee, you finish. What can you say to encourage? Because what Marie and I love to do with OAA Savannah is we do what, Marie?
Encourage, educate, and empower.
We encourage, educate, and empower. There you go, sister. What I want you to do right now, Louise, is I want you to encourage, but I also want you to educate the community, because you primarily are representing those that have not gone into the system, but who can be a force to change the system, both inside and out. So I want you to encourage, but also educate our audience so that they'll know what they can do and how they can help. But also, Lee, I want you to talk to the audience of those that are still on the inside. Encourage them so that they will know that when that time comes, they too will have the opportunities like you have. So I want you to encourage and empower not just those that we've left behind, but those returning citizens who have come home. Louise, you go first.
Well, in terms of encouragement, there are something like 75 million people in this country who've got some kind of a record. So you might feel like you're the only one, but you're not. And, you know, if you take an airplane for a vacation, or you're sitting on the bus, like a whole bunch of other people on that bus are actually in the same position as you. You just don't know it.
Right.
And so don't feel alone. And remember that Christ hung on a cross because he was convicted. So as it happens, you're kind of in good company. In terms of education, you know, there are resources out there, and you can go to your county workforce. But the truth of the matter is, often it's the church that's doing the work. And you might think that the church is for good people, but that isn't true. The church is just full of people who are forgiven. And you can be forgiven too. And so show up and get some help. And, you know, empowerment, you can advocate for yourself. And this change that Lee mentioned about being able to get off probation or parole early, particularly probation, if you've got your fines and fees paid, you can vote. I mean, here in Georgia and in a number of other states, we had really close elections, right? And we've got more elections coming up in 2022. So you might have thought your vote didn't count. But when it's 12,000 votes in the whole of the state of Georgia, 11 million people, and it came down to 12,000 votes, and some states were even closer than that, your vote counts. So, you know, you can show up at council meetings, you can advocate for funding in your county, in the budget for reentry, but you can vote. And your vote, it can change the course of Georgia. And, you know, whatever other state you're in, whether that's you know, Nevada and Mr. Daniels, who's the commissioner out there. You know, there's some great work being done in Vegas, and Chef Jeff. There's lots of good stuff going on around the country, and your vote can count.
Absolutely. I want to echo, first of all, encourage every person that is incarcerated, formerly incarcerated, got people or family members incarcerated. I want to encourage you with this one word, and Louise referred to it, and that is, it was something that the Lord showed me, and that was that the very first person that entered paradise with Jesus was a convicted felon. I want you to just think about that. He was the first. Now, then secondly, he had a 50% recidivism rate, right? He had one that believed and one didn't on the cross. And then here's one of the most important things that everybody is all inclusive in this statement, that everybody he took the place of through Barabbas, who was a convicted felon, a serial killer, that Jesus took the place of, that represents all humanity. All humanity. So everybody's got a chance. Now, I want to encourage you with that, because what that does is transform your identity. The first thing I want to encourage you with is that you and I must think differently, because the whole prison system is set up to give you a inferiority complex and identity. So the first thing they tell you when you come in prison, you get nothing. You don't have any favor. And I remember that little saying that came out that says, you know, I'm blessed and highly favored. And I went in from outside, coming inside saying I'm blessed and highly favored. And the officer told me, he said, you don't have no favor here. You get nothing. And so I quickly changed my statement that nobody can change. And that statement was, I said, I'm blessed and divinely favored. Whether you favor me or not, God's hand is on me. And this is how you just change the narrative in your own head, because the stigma of prison and gone to prison is big. It's a real thing. And a lot of times we really victimize ourselves by swallowing what people think about us. But if we have a better identity of ourselves, understand that you're valuable, understand that you are treasure, understand that you are I'm gonna try not to preach, Julius, but understand that you are treasure, and treasure is locked away for a period of time, and the longer it's locked away, the greater the treasure. And so if we understand that God just set us apart and set us aside for a long period of time to increase our value. So when you come out, stuff that bothers other people won't bother you. You know how to live with little and still be successful. People wondering, how in the world can a Julius Campbell do all those years but come out and do what he's doing today? It's because great value happens when you put something away, a treasure, lock it up. That means it's value. Look at your watches and your Rolexes and things of that nature. You lock it up because you don't want nobody to steal it. And so I want to encourage you. Education, and that goes for education. That's two of the points: education and encouragement. Here's the third thing: empowerment. Understand this. We always, because we had 3 meals and a cot in prison, we've always been given something to us. It created a spirit of entitlement. You always look. I have people that come in my reentry home. I got 15 beds. And they don't think they ought. It's just ought to be free. This is a non-profit organization. You ought to not charge us for this because you know we indigent. One of the things I teach our men when they come into out of prison and into our home, I teach them that this is called life empowerment, not life entitlement, because entitlement could be a curse if you rely upon it to get you somewhere. You can use it as an excuse when you don't have something. But if you decide in your mind that no matter hell or high waters, I'm going to make it whether you give me something or not. Whatever the challenge is, I got a God that's greater than my challenge. And so you got to have that relationship with God. Listen, don't fool yourself. Don't fool yourself. You need God. You can't do this. Listen, your best thinking got you where you are. How do you think you're going to do something different without God? We got to have his thoughts. Our thoughts are messed up. So I encourage you. Now I'm a pastor, but don't just don't blame, don't let that bother you. It ain't the pastor. I'm a brother in Christ first. Right? I'm just like you. I sat in the pew just like you. Somebody was pastoring me and still pastor me right now. And most of all, it ain't the title. It is what you do with your life. So be empowered. He has come that we might have life and have it more abundantly. Walk in that power. You are valued by God. You don't have to wait for handouts. Get a hand up and God will do the rest. Amen.
That's so true. And so true. You are exactly the same as you was when we were together in Atlanta. There's nothing changed about you. You still speak the same. You still want to empower others, and that is what exemplifies your life. We I often say that don't let anybody shame you. You can't let nobody shame you because you've already paid the price. You can't let anybody embarrass you because you've already paid the price. You might have started out wrong, like Julia said, but you can finish strong.
Come on.
And my thing is always been to tell people that once paid, a debt is no longer a debt because it's paid already. You did your time. You paid the penalty for that. Don't let nobody shame you into anything. You can't shame me. There's nothing you can say because then I start feeling bad. I got to be the best me that I could be so I can be the best me for me so I can be the best me for my family. So if I worry about you shaming me, I can't be that person. And this is what we try to encourage people to understand, that you can go anywhere from where you at. Just start walking.
That's right.
And God is it gets you through it. You have to have some belief and foundation to know that God is working in you. I can't let nobody stop me from doing what I'm doing because I have a mission. I've been disobedient all my life, but now I must obey the path that I got to walk. There's nothing you can do to stop me from doing that. I'm going to do it whether you like it or not.
Come on.
So that's my piece.
Wow. That's good.
That's your 2 minutes for the night.
That's me for the night.
Man, that's it right there. Miko. Listen, you hear Mr. Hall? He give his testimony. Look how God using it. Work now. I so appreciate
Miss Louise, you had something you want to say before we go?
Well, I was just going to say, I love the title of this, Incarceration to Incorporation, right? Because if somebody won't hire you, do what my dad did and create your own job, right? He did the day laboring thing to support his family, and then he did contracting, and he kept doing that right into his 70s because his old customers wouldn't let him stop work because the quality of his work was good. And so he created his own job that way. And you asked about successes. He passed away in 2020 at the beginning of the pandemic. And that was just really, really tough. But, he was in the local newspaper. He was actually on the front page of the local newspaper that he'd passed away, and his obituary was in there. And his obituary was bigger than the coverage of Prince Charles visiting my town.
Wow.
And it didn't say anything about what had happened to him because it wasn't relevant. What was relevant was how he'd contributed to the community. And he'd done a lot of stage work, whether that was like amateur dramatics that he did for like 30 years. He did TV extra work. And all these homes that he transformed, whether that was, you know, building on a conservatory, what you call a sunroom, bathrooms, kitchens, you know, and that's his legacy. And you guys can have that same legacy. And I'm, you know, it was just a wonderful, wonderful, redeeming thing to see.
That's awesome.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome. Marie, you want to say anything as we get ready to close out?
I just want to say thank you, Lee, and thank you, Pastor Lee and Miss Louise, for coming on the show. You all two are really, really encouraging. I just really, really thank you two for coming on the show. And I hope to see you all again.
Sure.
And Pastor Lee, I want to come to your church.
It's cyber. It is cyber too. You know, we do cyber as well. Yeah, I don't know where you're located.
Can you give me your web? I would like to hear you speak.
Yeah, www.thesource.church. Thesource.church.
Okay.
Yeah, you can get everything there.
Thank you.
And as we close, I just want to thank each of you again for coming out. Also, our audience, Tisha Fulcher say y'all just spoke the truth. This was great for her. I am excited as always for this platform so that we can continue changing the narrative that we may have started out wrong, but look at us now. We are finishing strong. Thank you for joining us on another edition of Ink to Ink. We'll see you next week. Good night.
Good night.
Good night.
Thank you.
Y'all stay in. Don't go nowhere.
Okay.
Like this.